I said, Yaniv, Jessica, are you expecting to plead guilty in January? Which is a very pertinent question, totally non-aggressive in the way I asked it. About 2 meters away from her, I stood. The sheriff was looking at me. It was totally kosher. And then Yaniv lost it. She turned around and said, "Fuck you, Keean." I'm standing outside of the Provincial Court of British Columbia, where Jessica Yaniv, Jonathan Yaniv, just appeared in court in relation to 2 breaches of the Firearms Act. There's 2 charges pending against Yaniv. Yaniv showed up today with his mother in tow, and it was one of the weirdest court appearances I've ever seen. And I've been at some doozies, particularly here in Vancouver. This lasted about 5 minutes. It was just Yaniv appearing in front of a justice of the peace, and what ended up happening is a little bit hard to explain. I wasn't allowed a video camera in the room. That would be contempt of court. But effectively, I showed up here today, and Yaniv sicked the sheriffs on me, saying, "I'm from Rebel News. I'm not allowed to be here, blah, blah, blah." Heard it all before. The sheriffs sort of bought into it a little bit. I was a little bit upset by that. I was sitting outside of the courtroom. It was courtroom 100 at 2 p.m. when Yaniv was supposed to be there. I was there at noon. A sheriff approaches me and says, "Were you in the parquet taking pictures of Jessica Yaniv's vehicle?" And I was like, no, that's a little bit weird. So I volunteered him my phone's photo gallery because, frankly, even though it was an invasion of privacy, I was more concerned about being in the courtroom and I didn't want to be kicked out. So I just proved to him straight away that Yaniv is a liar. This is Yaniv's MO, is lying. So I quickly briefed the sheriff on that, and he let me go. Pretty simple. We go into the courtroom. It lasts about 5 minutes. Yaniv appears, says he wants a trial in English, and then from there, things were about to wrap up. They scheduled the court appearance for January, mid-January next year, and from there, Yaniv said, "Well, hold on a minute. I want to say one thing." And I'm just repeating this to you because I wasn't allowed to film in the courtroom. I wasn't allowed to record at all because I'm not accredited here in British Columbia. Yaniv says, "I want to take a moment to say how outraged I am that I had to have a journalist arrested earlier today." And that perked my ears up. Turns out Yaniv did in fact have someone arrested today, at least according to someone who was standing outside of this building here when I left. It was someone by the name of Jonathan. I don't know the full story there, but Yaniv was very happy to tell the court that he had someone arrested, particularly someone who identifies as a journalist. Thought that was a little bit weird, and went on to brag about his own security detail, RCMP and otherwise. One of the weirdest interactions in a courtroom that I've ever seen, and the justice of the peace was more confused than I was, I think. It was a look kind of like not sure how to respond. She said, "Okay, well, sounds good," wrapped it up, and then Yaniv sort of was pushed out of the courtroom. Nobody needed Yaniv anymore, and her 5 minutes of the limelight were up. So Yaniv left. I left the courtroom as well, and this is when things got really interesting. I asked a very simple question to Yaniv as he was leaving. Not recorded or anything because I wasn't allowed to. It was just for my own background interest. I said, "Yaniv, Jessica, are you expecting to plead guilty in January?" Which is a very pertinent question, totally non-aggressive in the way I asked it. About 2 meters away from her, I stood. The sheriff was looking at me. It was totally kosher. And then Yaniv lost it. She turned around and said, "Fuck you, Keean," and launched herself towards me, raising her arms, his arms. It was, I suppose I should have expected it. Yaniv is always violent when it comes to journalists. I've never seen an interaction of Yaniv with a journalist when he has not gotten violent. And this probably speaks to the fact that he has so much testosterone flowing through his body. It's at this moment when the sheriff leaps into action, putting himself between myself and this violent Yaniv creature. I appreciate him doing this job and stopping this violent creep from assaulting me again, because this is what their family does, is assault journalists. You can watch this video here. Just watch him assaulting David Menzies. It's unbelievable what these people have been allowed to get away with. Now, while this was happening, Yaniv's mother also got between us and pushed her hand just on Yaniv's mouth like that, turned around and looked at me and said, "Don't talk to him." I thought that was very interesting that she said, "Don't talk to him." And then she turned to Yaniv and said, shut up, don't talk." And they just all pushed Yaniv away. and it was over before just as fast as it started, and Yaniv was shepherded up the stairs. I'm waiting outside of the courthouse right now, hoping that I'll be able to ask Yaniv a few questions outside of the courthouse. I don't think that's going to happen, and I have to catch my flight back home. I appreciate everyone who's pitched in to this coverage, because I did have to fly in from Calgary. It was about $800. Every dollar goes a long way to help us provide coverage. Something that I will note, somehow the mainstream media completely neglected today, and if it wasn't for our coverage here today, you might not even know that Yaniv was in court. I think that's a disgrace. Now, Yaniv faces 2 charges, and here's the crux of what the sentence could be. It's either 6 months in prison or $5,000 per offense. It's up to the judge, I believe. Now, if Yaniv pleads guilty, that could change. It could be more lenient. It could just be public service. We don't know. If it was me, if I was the judge, I'd be throwing the book at him, because frankly, we know that Yaniv is a public menace. Yaniv has a history of fraternizing with underage girls. He has a history of maliciously prosecuting in the Human Rights Tribunal immigrant women, putting many of them out of business. Yaniv is a public menace, and while he might not have any criminal priors, he certainly deserves to have the book thrown at him. Now, something that I'm also curious to know is whether Jonathan/Jessica Yaniv will be sent to a women's prison, whether he'll have to appeal being sent to a male's prison. We don't know what's going to happen, but what we do know is deep down, Jessica Jonathan Yaniv is a man. We know that because of his testosterone-fueled rages, his violent fits, and personal admission. Jonathan Yaniv, if he indeed goes to jail, should be sent to a men's prison, because that's what he is, and he shouldn't be allowed to put any more women at risk. For Rebel News, I'm Keean Bexte. Thanks so much for watching our coverage here in Surrey, British Columbia. I flew out here from Calgary. It was about $800. If you want to pitch in to help us out, you can go to rebelnews.com/donate, I believe it is. And if you want to kick a few bucks our way so that I can come back here in January and cover the sentencing, oh boy, I would really appreciate that.